Hey guys, welcome back to this channel. So I want to make this video as a little bit of a warning as to what's being discussed in the highest rungs of parliament in the EU. So supposedly this is something that's been discussed for a while, but it's being brought up again as a serious thing, and it's this thing here: EU's controversial asset registry proposal sparks privacy debate. So essentially in the EU, they want to make it so all their citizens need to register every asset that they have, everything from their real estate, from their business, cash assets, gold, and crypto. And this is something that is highly concerning, and I think for those that are perhaps less familiar about the history of asset forfeiture, I think it's very easy to be naive about what the actual intentions of this is. On the surface, they're going to mention things about anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism financing and stuff like that. But however, the problem is, I've noticed, particularly when it comes to the language of money laundering, is that you have to remember the original definition of money laundering was, let's just say someone robs a bank. They want to take their ill-gotten gains and they want to filter it back into the system to turn it into good money. So maybe they would take that money to a friend's business. The business would then record, a large number of sales, right? So the money would go into the business. Tax would be paid on that money, and then it would come out as clean. It can then go into a bank account, etc., etc. This is the very traditional understanding of what money laundering is. However, the definition of what a financial crime is has vastly increased to also mean things like, tax evasion, right? So now if someone wants to evade tax, which is it's definitely a crime, however, that can now be construed as money laundering. If someone does something that maybe is seen like, they're hiding their funds, instead of it just being, simple tax evasion, it can now be considered money laundering. And then that even can be tied in with other kinds of money laundering, like terrorism financing, or being involved with drug trafficking. So as someone that's involved in the PDP industry, I know someone who was not only debanked from every single bank account in the whole country, and essentially blacklisted from dealing in bank accounts simply for the crime of selling Bitcoin. But this person was in all the legal disposition, was essentially pulled in with people that were considered to be terrorist financing, right? Simply because this person was guilty of the crime of selling Bitcoin. Now, it's less clear to the average person that there's this war going on behind the scenes. Because I deal and I sell in Bitcoin, I understand how strict things are getting. And to me, when I see a proposal like this, it really does concern me. And I want to go into a little more detail about what's going on here. And let's look through here. So what I wanted to show you is, okay, I just wanted to read a little bit of it. Following Russia's war against Ukraine, leaders from the EU, Canada, and the United States formed a transatlantic task force to implement financial sanctions. To better monitor illegal monetary transactions, the EU proposed an interconnected asset register that would serve all of its member states, right? So because of this war, there's now more of an excuse to crack down on financial transactions. I want to make a point about London's financial system, right? So after World War II, the British Empire basically didn't really exist to the same degree it did in the past. Originally, the United Kingdom was the epicenter of industry and manufacturing. It was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. However, after World War II, it continued its I guess you could say its prosperity in the form of becoming a center for finance. And one of the ways that it did that is, particularly in the 80s with the Thatcher era, they deregulated the finance industry so much so that millionaires and people of high net worth all around the world could have a safe haven in the UK to essentially store their money, even have a pathway to citizenship and to buy as many things as they wanted. And this opened the door to credible businesses, but also opened the door to a lot of very shady characters. Everyone from drug cartels to corrupt dictators in Africa, to even Russian oligarchs. So after the end of the collapse of the Soviet Union, there were a number of very rich Russians who came about their fortune by buying up industry once the Soviet Union had collapsed, because they were the last people with money, they had the connections, and they were able to buy or sell off a large amount of industry. Then they took their wealth to Europe, and particularly London, where this essentially enriched the bankers in those countries, right? So this has been the de facto case in London for a long time. Because of the war, though, they've decided to selectively crack down on these Russian oligarchs, and this has caused a big crisis in confidence, essentially in their whole financial system. Because you might think, well, you know, who cares about some Russian billionaires? But the fact is, the fact is, it's a free and open system, generally for everybody, right? Whether you agree with that or not. For the most part, they will leave you alone. If they're going to leave a Russian banker, a Russian oligarch alone, even a Mexican cartel, as bad as that is, and there's a lot I don't agree with these hyper-libertarian reforms of the financial system. The reality is, the idea is they would leave everyone alone. The fact that they're willing to go against one of their own customers now is kind of a sign that they might start just going after everybody the moment there's a war or some kind of, the next thing in the news cycle pops up. And you have to understand, like, these aren't necessarily people that are politically, how can we say, these aren't necessarily political people, right? It would be understandable, perhaps, if these were Russian politicians, right? Or these were state companies or something like that. But, the irony is that the people that were pulling their funds out of Russia, these oligarchs, were actually very against Putin in the current regime. Putin wants people to bring money back into Russia. So these people were extremely happy to be very anti-Russian, pull their funds out of the country, start a completely new life abroad. And the irony is that, now they're being, persecuted in their newfound lands, and many of them probably even want to go back. But the point is that they're willing to go after these people that actually have not much to do with the war as far as we know. And the reason why they're being persecuted, because frequently what these individuals will do is they'll start an LLC, they'll start a company, they put their funds in there, and essentially it's not Roman Abramovich that owns billions of dollars, it's Roman Abramovich holding LLC that owns all these companies. These are technically Russian companies, and therefore they're open to sanction, right? So I know it sounds strange, because it's not like you want to necessarily defend these people. Like, I don't think that's really what I'm aiming for. But it's kind of like just seeing where the dominoes are falling down, right? And ultimately, it's also because this is not ideologically, how can I say, congruent with their overall ideas. They'll let anyone in it, but now not these guys. The question is when they're going to start doing to other people. Now, to me, the beginning of the end of the current, EU being like a good center, a trusted center for finance, is when it's going to do things like this, right? So I just want to read this again real quick from the beginning. The European Union is exploring a controversial proposal to establish a centralized asset register, a comprehensive database designed to track citizens across the bloc. Assets across the bloc. This initiative aims to combat money laundering and terrorist financing, but has also raised concerns on privacy and data protection. The proposed register would encompass a wide range of assets such as real estate, bank accounts, securities, vehicles, art, precious metals. The final list will be determined based on the outcomes of feasibility. So I just made a recent video, and it was about why KYCing your crypto, buying crypto through a KYC'd exchange, puts you in so much danger, right? So first, it de-anonymizes you when you provide KYC to the exchange, right? Because technically, if your government requested it of the exchange, they could theoretically just give all your information away, right? That was the point of the video, but I made another point that was kind of peripheral to this idea, and that's that I remember going to one of these crypto conferences in the place where I was living, and there was someone who was a crypto tax professional, and he was basically explaining how crypto tax is seen on the other end of the spectrum by these three-letter agencies that manage our tax world. And he says that if they know that you have crypto, they aren't going to know how much you have, but what they can do is they can guess, they can estimate how much you have. Then what they're going to do based on the estimate is they're going to send you a tax bill. Now that tax bill might be wildly inaccurate, but it's kind of like a guilty until proven innocent thing. When they send you like $1 million to be paid up in tax, what you then have to do in order to avoid having to pay that tax bill is then you then need to go through your entire blockchain history. Maybe you have to find a professional that will audit your entire blockchain history, and then going to they want to know exactly when you first started buying cryptocurrency, every on-chain transaction you have, every shitcoin you ever purchased, every single time you bought and sold cryptocurrency, every time you tried leverage trading, every time you bought some shitcoin and lost it. They want to know everything, and you need to do that. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to prove that you don't owe $1 million in crypto. And this is a very dangerous thing, because once they have that information, they're then going to know exactly how much you have in crypto. They're going to know what your addresses are, and they're probably going to still bilk you, right? Because you can provide all this information, and they can say, you know what, we don't think that's a whole story. We think you owe us more, right? And then you're going to have to, continue to prove that you aren't a millionaire in cryptocurrency, and then you're going to have to, cough up more information that they'll have, and they're just going to keep bilking you about it. And you might say, fine, I don't mind about my privacy. I just want to do the right thing because the tax man is actually a good person. But I want to give another example to you, right? So I don't use Binance anymore. And the reason why is because Binance essentially froze my account one day, and they basically gave me an ultimatum. They're like, you have 30 days to show what your proof of income is, what your source of wealth is, how did you get this money, why did you deposit funds on this day? And they had come up with a figure that said I had over like $1.3 million in deposits on the platform. Now, I know where this money came from, but they're not going to accept my answer, and I don't even care to give it to them. The truth is, I've been buying Bitcoin since like 2017, and like a lot of idiots out there, I lost a bunch of that money, on stupid things. I bought it at the high, I sold it at the low, and there were times like in 2021 where like I bought some meme coin, it skyrocketed in value, I traded for some other coin, it went down in value. So I'm not even close to being a millionaire. And if I was, I certainly wouldn't say it because I think that's a smart thing to say. The point is, though, that Binance thought I was a millionaire, and it felt that it had a right to ask me exactly where I got all this money over the years, right? Now, they're only doing that because they have some agreement with the tax office or, whatever agency, financial regulator in my country that, if they want to do business, they need to ask questions like that. So supposedly, I guess I went over some kind of threshold that triggered something in the system, and all of a sudden my government wanted to know exactly everything about it without understanding like all the details. So the thing is, if I provided all that information, who knows, maybe I'll get a letter from my tax office saying, hey, you're a millionaire, you owe us this much money, now prove that you're not a millionaire. And then I have to basically unravel the blockchain, go through all of my history, give it to them in order for them to kind of get off my case, right? This, to me, reminds me of like, if you watch those mob movies, like A Shakedown, the tax office, they salivate when it's a crypto bull run because it's not even that everyone has more money and they can tax more, because I'm not even suggesting that people avoid paying taxes. What I am suggesting is that they are going to get greedy and they are going to try and get more out of you than you actually need to pay. And this is just combined with the fact that the fundamental reason for this at the end of the day is most countries' governments are ultimately going bankrupt, right? And I think there is going to be increasing reasons for the government to bilk their citizens unnecessarily. And I want to use that to get into my next point. And I want to give you like a very big concern about the fact that governments have this intention deep down. Even if you think it's not possible, the fact is that ultimately the whole financial system is a Ponzi scheme. The fiat dollar is not backed by anything. They have trillions of dollars worth of debt they'll never be able to pay back, but they need to continue to secure the bureaucracy that they pay for. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they're going to have to get that money from somewhere. Let's look at what Balaji says. The EU is bankrupt and preparing for asset seizure. It's why they're building this registry. That what's coming is not just inflation, but confiscation. This is how they bail out central banks. So this is he's pointing to a news headline from Financial Times, bailing out central banks, and it goes on to explain exactly how they're going to do it. And for those that think this is a fake tweet or a fake news headline, I'm actually going to pull up the article here, and actually it is a real article, and it explains exactly how they're going to do it. There's every intention to bail out your government from all the board decisions, from all the wars, all the overspending, and of course the central bank, who the governments it's impossible for them to pay back, but they still have a liability to try. And at some stage, it's only reasonable that they're going to continue to increase the tax rate, increase, every manner of way that they can to get money out of their citizens' pockets. They're going to do it. Ultimately, it's almost as if, like, it's bad enough that you don't even own your own money, right? When you own cash in the bank, you don't really own your money, because the central bank can just print money out of thin air, devaluing it, ultimately stealing it from you, even though it's in your bank. And then you don't own money in your bank account, also because you're an unfunded creditor. And if that money, you're an unsecured creditor. So ultimately, you're loaning money to the bank. If that bank goes bust, there's no collateral. You can't get that money back, and there's no consequences on their behalf. Let's go to the next point. A brief history on gold confiscation, right? And I'm going to use US as an example. This has happened in more countries, and it's just basically a staple throughout history. At some stage, the people who are most in charge, it doesn't matter if it's a democracy, it doesn't matter if it's a communist government, it doesn't matter if it's an empire, it doesn't matter if it's a foreign conquering barbarian horde that takes control over the society. The seizure of property from the people who have less power to the people who have more power, it's a standard thing throughout history. And I just want to drill in this point for you to make it clear that even first world democracies do this. So the first time this happened in America was the War of 1812. There was the invalidation of gold clauses and the closing of gold mints. Then in the Civil War, there was physical confiscation and invalidation of gold clauses. Then there was the Great Depression in 1933. There was physical confiscation of gold. And if you refused to give it up, you could even be imprisoned. And then there was Nixon's suspension of Bretton Woods, which basically made it so you couldn't redeem your US dollars in gold, which prior to that stage, all US dollars were at least somewhat partially backed by gold. And now they got rid of that connection. And so the idea that even America couldn't do this it's asinine. It doesn't conform with what we've seen throughout history. Now, you might argue that you're in a different generation, a different cycle of history, so maybe it won't happen. I could at least accept that argument. The idea that it's not on the books for any country, particularly even first world countries, to do this to their own citizens and engage in outright theft, and for it to even be accepted as just that something that just kind of happens. The idea that this is like some strange conspiracy is really asinine, in my opinion. I think more people should be very concerned about what their own government will try and do with their money. Let's look at this next one here. What did I want to show you? How many countries did this happen to? And by the way, this wasn't just the United States. This is talking about the Great Depression. As employment exploded and prices collapsed through 1930 and 1931, nations such as Canada, Japan, Australia, the UK, and Sweden began to suspend the commitments to the gold pivot. They did this by ending their promise to convert their currencies into gold or gold-linked currencies. By severing the link between the gold market and prices, they hoped to dull some of the economic damage. But ultimately, they're dulling the economic damage by essentially stealing from their citizens. It wouldn't surprise me if a Great Depression we might have one in the next 10 years. Who knows? Things are looking pretty bad. 2008 wasn't even that long ago. We had bailouts where essentially, banks came hand in hand to the government and just asked them for free money. And everyone essentially had to pay for it with their tax money, right? And bailouts were a big talk of 2008. Everyone was upset. But what's actually more likely and very concerning in the future is something called a bail-in. So the bailout would be the government giving a bunch of free money to banks to keep them propped up. And the government ultimately gets that money from the treasury. It's essentially people's hard-earned tax money that would go to prop up these banks, and everyone has a right to be upset about it. But the thing that's even more worse than this and more likely to happen next time around is something called bail-ins, which is a similar kind of thing, except it's more direct and more extreme. Basically, banks can technically have the ability to appropriate the savings of their constituents if in the event there is a potential bank collapse. So what is a bail-in? A bail-in provides relief to a financial institution on the brink of failure by requiring the cancellation of debts owed to creditors and depositors. A bail-in is the opposite of a bailout, which involves the rescue of a financial institution by external parties, typically the governments, using taxpayers' money for funding. Bailouts help to prevent creditors from taking on losses, while bail-ins mandate creditors to take losses, right? Where is it? So here's a little bit more information about bail-ins, because some people, again, would think it's just some kind of conspiracy theory, right? Let's talk about the Dodd-Frank Act, right? And this is really important. I hope this is not too stale for you. I just want to get this out of the way to make my point clear. In response to the public outrage after TARP, which was related to this whole thing, rescued the banks that were too big to fail, bail-ins became an available legal option through the 2010 Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, known today as Dodd-Frank. This legislation overhauled the regulation of almost every sector within the financial services industry in the United States, and its sweeping changes affected all federal financial regulatory agencies. One of the measure's most significant provisions makes the use of taxpayer funding to rescue any financial institution as a solution of last resort. The Dodd-Frank bail-in provision was actually an adaptation of a multinational framework designed a few months before by the European Union in response to the financial crisis in that region. The framework is known today as the Base III International Reforms, and like the other Basel Accords since 1978, it is administered by the Bank of International Settlements. During deliberations between the votes on these measures, European and American policymakers supporting the bail-in procedure relied on several justifications. They argued that enabling banks to transform their debt into equity would release the pressure on taxpayers to cough up enough money under the threat of a systemic collapse of the banking system. They also just one last thing. Hang on, what did I want to read? They also contended that the bail-in procedure was essential to provide relief in the event of banking collapses inside financially strapped, distressed jurisdictions where tax revenues weren't available, such as Greece, Bulgaria, and Croatia. And the proponents also argued that forcing banks to apply an internally executed bail-in strategy was the only practical means to force banks to exercise more corporate responsibility on behalf of their stakeholders. Which is absolutely okay. So this is really crazy. So let me break this down just really quick, right? So what is an unsecured creditor, right? So an unsecured credit is someone that loans money to someone without receiving any deposit, any collateral, right? So if you borrow $1,000 from me, I give you $1,000, right? You're not putting any money up, so when you go to those gold pawn stores, right? You go in, you get $1,000 loan. I've never done it, but this is basically how it works. And then some dude, probably a crack addict, right? He brings out his stereo, right? And he gives it to the person at the counter who values it hopefully at $1,000. And the person at the counter is like, okay, if you don't return your $1,000 by this time, I'm keeping your stereo, right? That's what you would call collateral, right? So an unsecured loan would basically be the person just giving $1,000 and there's no collateral. So there's nothing that this person can take just in case the person runs off with the money. Now, what people don't understand is that when they're depositing money into the bank, they're actually really loaning money to the bank, because the bank supposedly takes that money and then loans it to other people that want to take out loans. They give that out, and they're actually using your money to make money. But the thing is, even though they're taking this money from you, they're not providing you any collateral. They're not providing you any guarantees that once they take that money and they're using it for their own purposes, that there is something that, if something happened to that money, you're not going to get anything in return. So you're what's considered you're basically a debtor to them. So you're a creditor to them, right? And you're not even getting anything back. So basically, they can just take that from you if they're in a situation where they feel that the banks are going to collapse and it's too big to fail. We've already decided that in this, in this Frank Dodd Act, that bailouts are too heavy, because it'd be unethical to require taxpayers to pay out the banks. So what would be more ethical and more better would be if banks just simply dip their hand into the bank accounts of the average individual, take it for themselves in order to prop up their own Ponzi system, and that's just basically how it's going to go. It's essentially theft from the from the poor to the rich, a reverse kind of Robin Hood, if you will. And I just want to end on one final note. I should have made this point earlier, right? From yachts to lavish estates tracking Russian assets seized so far. And I think CNN, because this was like kind of earlier towards the start of the Ukraine war, I think they kind of wanted to make a big showing about, how we got them. We got the Ruskies, right? Look, we took this $600 million yacht from this Alisher Usmanov, right? This greedy, what's it called? What are they called? The oligarch, right? We just took it from him, right? He just deserved it, right? And we took the big super yacht because they're funding a war, right? And by the way, these are people that are very anti-Putin, by the way. That's the big irony, right? We just took it from him, right? Victor Velksberg, valued at 90 million. We just took his yacht as well. We just seized it from him, right? And they're going to sell it right now, and they're going to help use it to fund the Ukraine war, right? Fee linked to a Russian businessman valued at 50 million. Like, you notice how it doesn't really tell you exactly what they did and what their ties to the Putin regime is. I mean, the irony is that, again, a lot of these people are very anti-Putin, even though it says, Fee yacht belonged to an unnamed Russian businessman with ties to Vladimir Putin. Everyone who is an oligarch has ties to the Russian regime in some way, right? They're all connected together, but they don't necessarily like each other. I just find it absolutely absurd that we can have mainstream news bragging about how it just steals money from people, steals their assets. And you might think, well, look, they deserve it, but it's just like, if they can do it to them, why can't they do it to you? So the point is that when you see that they're starting to make an asset registry to know what all your funds are, just know that they're coming for you at some stage. I don't know when, but when things start to get tied around the waist, don't be surprised if they use this kind of information against you. Now, a big part of my channel is debanking, and debanking means using cryptocurrency in order to reduce your reliance on central banking systems. And this is the original intention of cryptocurrency. In the Bitcoin white paper, it was called a peer-to-peer means of exchange. Unfortunately, Bitcoin is no longer people no longer have that vision of it, right? People are using it as a store of wealth, as a way of squirreling away their funds. But the idea of debanking is that you're going to completely reduce your reliance on the central banking system by using your Bitcoin to buy and sell things and to store your wealth and to actually make it anonymous. The problem is when you go to centralized exchanges like Binance, like Bybit, or all the other ones, you need to provide your KYC, and you can end up in a situation like I described it before, where they one day just say, hey, you need to provide like all this information to your government. Your government's going to essentially de-anonymize your crypto usage. They're going to know everything you have. They're going to bilk you for more of it. So if you really are serious about debanking and using crypto for what it's used for, the first step is to ensure that you're able to anonymize your crypto usage by ensuring that every time that you buy cryptocurrency with fiat, you're doing so without KYC. And that brings me to the sponsor of this video, which is Local CoinSwap and HODL HODL. You see, these are two exchanges that will allow you to buy cryptocurrency without KYC on a non-custodial platform. So what this means is that when you're going to trade with another person, you're going to when you're buying crypto from the platform, you're going to do it by dealing directly with the seller. So when you deal directly with the seller, all that's going to be obvious on your bank account is that, you know, Dave sent funds to John, and that's it, right? When you send funds to a cryptocurrency exchange, it's going to say Dave sent funds to Binance, right? Your government's going to have that information, they're going to keep it, they're going to use it against you. So the most anonymous way to be buying and selling cryptocurrency is through peer-to-peer cryptocurrency exchanges. Then you're going to want to find a way to buy and sell real life things with your crypto. You can use some of my referral links in the description down below if you're interested in using your cryptocurrency to buy items like Amazon items. You can use it to buy gift cards. You can use it to buy anonymous credit cards, things like that. There are all kinds of things you can do with cryptocurrency to debank. So check out my referral links in the description below if you're interested in learning how to debank and what you can do with your crypto. And also make sure to subscribe to my channel because I've got a lot of videos about how to debank, and I'm sure you'll find it very useful. So thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.